Hi, everybody. It is Dean Z speaking to you from my basement. And today I am going to be answering questions from Instagram. Thanks so much to all of you who submitted questions. Okay, from Marissa A. Do you recommend reaching out to admissions and or faculty? Great question. I am interpreting this to mean, do I recommend it for people who are in the application stage who haven't yet gotten a decision? I definitely think that if you have questions about an institution and you're in the application stage, you should reach out to admissions, and they should be more than willing to help you. I don't recommend, though, reaching out directly to faculty. Definitely when you're not admitted, but even when you're admitted, and here's why. Faculty get a lot of emails, and which is, I think, the case for all of us. And if they're getting one from someone that they don't know, they might want to check in with me first and say, like, who is this person? And maybe they put off doing that, and then it's like 2 weeks and they haven't answered, and then they're embarrassed and you never get an answer. So I think the best way to do it is to always go first to the admissions office and say, I would like to speak with Professor, Sarah Schmera. Can you connect me? And then the admissions office will either say, yeah, we can do that, or no, let us talk to you about these issues, depending on the school's norms and depending on where you are in the process, and depending on the particular faculty member you're interested in, like if they're on leave or something. So there's a lot of reasons why I think it is always to your benefit as an applicant to use the admissions office as an intermediary for talking to anyone else at the law school until you become an actual student. Yeah, thanks for asking that. Here's a question from Andrew C, who asks, I love your video on Ann Arbor. Thank you. Where do you go for the best pizza? Great question. Honestly, Andrew, in my old broadhood, I don't eat a lot of pizza anymore. Don't want to upset anybody about the future, but aging has many sad side effects, one of which is I don't seem to tolerate pizza that well. But if I were going to eat pizza, I really love New York Pizza Depot. It's incredibly greasy and delicious. Also like Neapolis and also Anthony's Pizza. And that seems like a lot of places for someone who just told you she doesn't eat pizza to recommend for pizza, doesn't it? I also want to say, though, I love Pizza Bob's for their chapati. We didn't talk about chapatis in the Ann Arbor video, but they are one of my favorite Ann Arbor specific foods. Check it out. They also have a pizza house, but I am a fan of Pizza Bob. Great question from someone named, I think, Mitch. Is military officer experience valuable for applicants? Absolutely. So actually this year I've seen a lot more military applications than I have in the last couple of years. So that's been interesting. And I think it is showing up in our admissions numbers too. I love people who do public service. And of course, military service is about as demanding of public service as a person can engage in. Interesting you say military officer. I don't know that I make that distinction so much. So yeah, I'm gonna be really frank. There's a lot about the military that is not obvious to people who have not been in the military. So I do my best, obviously, to interpret it, as do the other people on my staff who are reading files. But I think that is a great tip for someone who has a military background who's applying to law school. Don't assume a ton of knowledge on the part of the readers, and make sure you are, if there's something special about your experience, whether it's because you were an officer or had some other role, I think it is really helpful if you can figure out a way to make that as clear as possible, either through the descriptions in your resume or through information that someone might include in a letter of recommendation, although that's hard for you to control, or perhaps essays. So just remember you're talking to, some relative ignorance on the part of the readers, and there's lots of branches of service and lots of differences among them. So Chris B asks, how is the public transportation service in Ann Arbor? Well, it's a bus. It's a bus system. There's no subway. It's too small for that. But it is a very good bus system, and it is, there's actually two bus systems. Honestly, there's a university bus system, and then there's an Ann Arbor Transportation Authority bus system, and both are free to University of Michigan students, and it's quite comprehensive and covers the whole city very well. Yeah, so I think it's pretty good. Also want to put a plug in. Ann Arbor is one of those cities that is, very into trying to support biking, and every year the number of bike dedicated lanes and streets that have space for safe biking expands. And I am not one of these people because I'm a big old coward, but there are a lot of people who bike all year long in Ann Arbor, even when it is, it's coldest or it's wettest. And so one of those is on the admissions office staff, actually, Eric Schwazi. So anyway, kudos to those intrepid souls. Allison A asks, prediction for next cycle, more apps, less apps, etc. I hate making predictions because I don't like to be wrong, and it's really just guessing, right? But I would say there can't possibly be more apps. So let's go with flat or fewer. Margot M asks, is the evaluation process different for international students? Great question. Yes and no. I mean, it's not so much being an international student that makes the difference. It is the question of your English language background. So if you are from a country where English is not the principal language, we're going to be looking to make sure that you've had extensive exposure to English, particularly, the kind of academic setting English that you'll need to use in law school and then beyond, because obviously language is a huge part of the practice of law. So that is something that if you are a U.S. citizen and have gone to school here, that's going to be self-evident. Whereas if you have been educated in another country, that's going to be something that we're going to be actually wondering about. So to that extent, it is different. Natalia asks, how hard is it to get off-campus housing? It is not hard. But this is the way I have heard it described by many a law student, that you can get two out of 3 things in your housing. You can get great location, you can get good price, or you can get beautiful accoutrement in your apartment, right? But you can't get all 3. And I think that's probably right. Most law students tend to live a little away from the law school because in the immediate vicinity of the law school and the university tend to be undergrad housing. And when you are a professional student, you might prefer not to be right next to a house where the weekend starts on Wednesday. So they tend to go to slightly farther afield neighborhoods. One that is particularly popular is the Old West Side. Another one is Carytown, and a lot of neighborhoods sort of in that general vicinity. And I think there's a lot there. There are also newly in Ann Arbor in the last few years, there's all these new high-rise apartments that are full of luxurious amenities and so forth. Mostly law students do not live there. Interestingly, because you might think, oh, they're going on to be lawyers, they'll have money, blah, blah, blah. But they, law students tend to be very, very debt averse, and these tend to be expensive. And so I'm not really sure who is living there. And someday I will solve that mystery, perhaps by just barging in and knocking on random doors. AJ asks, how large are your scholarship opportunities? So we sometimes the smallest scholarship we ever award is $5,000. That's pretty rare. Usually, it's usually a basement of $10,000, and then up to a full ride plus a stipend. Yeah, so a full range. The average, though, the average scholarship is in the $25,000, somewhere between 25 and $30,000 range, and about 75 to 80% of the class are getting some scholarship. Criteria for scholarships, part of it is just LSAT and GPA, and then another part of it, though, is also your need. That's another kind of scholarship we give, history of financial need. And another part is, are you getting awards from other peer schools? And can we compete with those? Because when we've admitted you, we'd love to be able to enroll you. So we are very happy, if we have not made you an award under our system, to talk to you about what you might be getting from other schools and try to, give you an award that will make you choose Michigan. Okay, here's an interesting question from, I'm going to say Emmy. Hi, Dean Z. Could you possibly give some more clarity to the large number of waitlists? So I assume she means when she says more clarity. I did an episode about that. I don't know that I can add too much to that episode because I was blabbing for a while on that one. But here's what I would say. We invite every year we invite a number of people to join the waitlist. These are all people who, upon our first review or second review, because one person reviews it and then I review it. Upon second review, we think this is someone who we would be happy to have in the class, but we are not able to admit everybody we'd be happy to have in the class. So this person is going to get waitlisted. This year, that methodology has resulted in more waitlist offers because we have about 2,000 more applications this year than last year. So we have correspondingly more waitlist invitations. However, I am happy to tell you that, all the people that we invite do not say yes. Weird, I know, but they don't. So a lot of them end up getting released. So if you see, say, 100 people saying, oh, I got a waitlist invitation, typically about 40 of those will say, not going to participate. So it is fewer than it looks. And then, there's a lot more uncertainty this year because the pool is so much larger. It just means that there's much less predictability on our end. And so we expect that after the deadline, we may be able to make some offers from the wait list. But at a minimum, we'll have a lot of clarity about what it looks like. So if we know we can't admit people, we will, I'm diligent about, releasing people from the wait list as soon as I know I'm not going to be able to get to you. And so it will get much smaller pretty quickly after our April 30th deadline. Thank you to all of you who are interested in participating. I know it is no one's favorite part of the admissions process. And I'm really grateful for everybody who's patient enough to play along. Someone named Coach asks, are pre-law fraternities viewed favorably? Yes, I mean, they're certainly not viewed unfavorably. I don't know that it's not really a positive factor either. I think pre-law fraternities are a great thing to be involved in, though, for many applicants, because, if you have uncertainty about the legal field, you think you might be interested, but you don't know, it's a great way to get exposed to a lot of legal professionals who will come in and talk to your group, and to learn from other people in the group, what sorts of things they hope to go on to do. And you'll soak up a lot of knowledge about the legal profession. Plus, you will be with lots of people who share your interests in law, which is, I think, a big part of choosing any student group, like-minded individuals. So I would encourage people who are interested to join pre-law fraternities or pre-law student groups or whatever it may be. Nina asks, what's your favorite specific Mlaw tradition? I love this question. Let's think. I think it's Mr. Wolverine. I have a really soft spot for this. It's our ironic male beauty pageant. And it was the idea of Alicia Jimenez, one of our alumni, wonderful person, who came to dinner once at my house and got me kind of drunk, I think, and then said, if I have this idea for this fundraising event, if I pull it off, will you be an MC? And I was like, sure. And then she did it, and then I was MC for a number of years, and tons of fun. I still often participate as a judge. It's like a lot of dancing and silliness and funny skits and making fun of professors and administrators. I have lent various frames, glass frames, to young men participating in the contest who wish to imitate me, for example. Anyway, tons of fun. I think that's probably the one. Okay, here's a good question. How would you describe the Ann Arbor vibe to someone coming from a big city? So we talked about this a bit in the Ann Arbor video, which was, I think, the one right before this one. So Ann Arbor is about 130,000 people, so not a big city by any stretch of the imagination, but it is very, full of people who are associated with the University of Michigan. And that tends to be people who, like art, like music, like, restaurants, like plays, like lots of other kinds of culture. So it has a disproportionate number of all these things for a city its size. I'd say it's a progressive city in many ways. So we have a prosecutor, alum Ellie Sabat, who is, a progressive prosecutor, very committed to social justice. It prides itself on its tolerance and acceptance. A lot of sort of crunchy granola types, I'd say. Doesn't mean it's perfect, but it is, I would say, full of people who are, aspirationally perfect, which I like. I like being around that. So I would say there's enough here to keep you very busy as a busy law student, in terms of your entertainment. And then you will always feel fond of it when you ditch us and move to the big city after you graduate. Here is a question from Dustin J., who asks, what have you learned from filming A2Z? Well, Dustin, I've learned that it's important to have good colleagues who keep you from messing up. I've also learned to turn off my furnace before I record, and I've learned, as of today, that you can unplug the sump pump so that it won't interrupt when you're videotaping. I've also learned to try really hard to look at the part of the phone that has the camera on it. Oh, I've learned a lot. I've learned a great deal. Thanks for asking. Okay, here's a question. Is it possible to visit campus right now? Yes and no. So Michigan and Ann Arbor in particular are doing pretty well in terms of COVID stuff. It's a technical term. But the buildings, the university buildings are all closed unless you have a student ID and, have been loaded in as someone who is having a class in that building. You can see the outsides of the buildings and you can see the town itself. And I would say that's pretty important. Again, just talked about the Ann Arbor vibe, but it's something that unless you've experienced it, it's hard to imagine. And I think it is, if at all possible, it's worth it to make a visit here and get a sense of what you'd be getting into. And is it to your taste? Here's someone who says, do you actually read every application? Indeed, I do. January was a very dark time because I was about 2,000 applications off of my own personal goals for where I would be. Hunkered down for a few weekends and dug out of the holes. Yeah, I think it's really important that I read every application. If you don't, if I'm not going to read them, then I'd have to have some system for which ones I'm not going to read. And that would involve cutoffs, either LSAT or GPA. And I just That's just not my philosophy of how you should be using either of those numbers. And yeah, so I am committed to reading every application and picking out people who are gems, who we want to have with us, whose LSAT or GPA may not at first glance reflect that gemishness. So yeah. Here's a question. How much do you miss being on campus? A whole big bunch. Thanks for asking. Here's a question from Julie H. Do you accept Canadian citizens to study/transfer to Michigan law? Thoughts on a current 1L Canadian American wanting to apply as a transfer? If so, what makes a transfer candidate stand out? Is undergrad GPA/LSAT factored into the transfer process? So that's actually 4 questions. So I would say Julie H says Canadian citizens. What I'm thinking she means, though, is like people who are at Canadian law schools. If she means Canadian citizens who are at U.S. law schools, the answer is like definitely same as anybody else, right? Anybody can apply to transfer after their first year. And the thing we put far and away the most emphasis on is your first year performance in whatever your home school is, as well as I care a lot about what your letter of rec from a faculty member looks like, and I care a lot about what you are doing over the summer, if you have a law-related job or not. Really don't care about your GPA or LSAT. Just don't care. Don't care. They're only meant to predict what you do in your first year, and if you're applying as a transfer, I can see what you did in your first year. So don't care. If, though, what Julie means is how do we treat people trying to transfer from Canadian law schools, my answer is an embarrassed, I don't really have an answer for that. I don't recall ever getting an applicant from a Canadian law school as a transfer, so I would need to look into that. So email me. I think that is a genteel, that's a genteel sufficiency of questions to have answered. Thank you again for all of you who wrote in. Really, this was a lot of fun for me. Gave me a lot of energy. So thank you. Now, though, don't think we're going to go without doing a little grammar. We're going to do a little grammar. So on Tuesday, I was in the office, as I am every Tuesday. That's my one day in the office right now. And I noticed a box on which a staff member had written, don't use these ones this year. I actually don't know what's in the box or why we're not using them this year. What I noticed was that she had written these ones. What's wrong with that sentence? You don't need ones. All you have to say is don't use these this year. So if you're saying these or those, whatever, don't put the ones afterwards. It's all part of simplifying our language. Cut out as many words as you possibly can. All right, that's all I got. Would love to hear your feedback and suggestions. And as you can tell, I really love answering any questions you have. So please feel free to leave them in the comments below or email us at law.jd.admissions@umich.edu. And you might want to check out my admissions blog if this was helpful. And finally, as always, many thanks to Dustin Johnston, who is the brains behind the operation. So wherever you go, go blue.